Hello everybody, welcome back to my Pokemon review series. In this episode, I am very proud to present to you the Dragonites. Now, Dragonite, I think he's adorable. He's one of my favorite Pokemon. I just love his design. Isn't he a little cutie? While also being big and menacing at the same time. Anyway, aside from that, in this game, it's one of the best Pokemon in the game. In my opinion, the best ingredient specialist in the game for a multitude of reasons. Let's get into that. Let's get into why. Now, something very significant to say about the Dragonite, and heed with caution about the Dragonite, is you want to make sure that you know what you're investing into when you invest into a Dragonite, because it is a pseudo-legendary, which means that it has a much heavier XP cost to level up, 1.5 times to be precise. It's very expensive to take a pseudo-legendary up to level 60, which is where they really reach their maximum strength. But they are worth it if you catch a good one, you know what you're doing with them, and you have the right sub-skills in nature. So, let's get into this guy. Now, he's the dozing type. That is typical of dragon Pokemon in this game. Actually, I believe all the dragon Pokemon currently in the game are dozing type. It's got the ingredient specialty, which as of right now is the trend for pseudo-legendaries. They seem to all be the best ingredient specialist of their type, of whatever ingredient they're producing, and they all have the Charge Energy S, and they all have ingredient specialty. However, that is based on only 2 Pokemon, but that is currently the case. And if I start to explain why, the stars just aligned to make this guy amazing. First off, it's got the Charge Energy S main skill, which is amazing for flexibility on ingredient specialists, especially ones that you want to be swapping around as you have the ingredients you want, which, especially if you get to the AAA mono list option, this guy will not be spending that much time on your team, so having that main skill just makes it so easy to just put him in for a couple hours, get what you need, bring him out. Very flexible Pokemon because of that main skill. This skill is like A tier on ingredient specialists, maybe even S tier, maybe the best skill for ingredient specialists. Despite not being good on berry or skill specialists, like at all. I only really like to see it on the ingredient specialists. Now, it boasts a really high ingredient rate of 26.4%. If you remember back to my Venusaur episode, that's comparable to the Venusaur. Venusaur's got a ingredient rate of 26.6%, so like they're pretty much the same, but the Dragonite is faster than the Venusaur. At 43 minutes and 20 seconds, the Venusaur has that base speed of 46 minutes and 40 seconds, and the Venusaur is considered a very strong ingredient specialist. So the Dragonite's got like the same ingredient rate almost, but a significantly faster speed. So this guy is just insane. Now, it's also got a high ingredient, an inventory bag, because why not give it more? I mean, I think the idea behind it is you're investing heavy into the Dragonite, it costs more to level up, so you're getting a reward for actually getting it to those higher levels. And boy, are you getting a reward. So it's got the 20 ingredient inventory space, which I think is the highest that I reviewed so far on this series. And it's in a 3-stage line, a 3-stage evolutionary line, so it gets 2 tiers of evolution, which gets that inventory up to 30. One could even make the argument that it's worth it to catch a Dragonair almost, if it didn't cost more pips, just because it doesn't necessarily need more inventory. Just because it's got a pretty high base inventory rate, so if you catch it as a Dragonair, it doesn't even get too impeded by it, because especially after you get those good sleep ribbons in, this thing's gonna have like 38 inventory, which is quite a bit. Granted, this dude actually kind of needs it because he produces a lot of ingredients, so, but 5 extra inventory isn't gonna help when we're talking like quantities like this. So the other thing that it's really got going for it is the ingredient list. Now, if I go back to making the Venusaur comparison, then you'll see that the Venusaur procs honey at 257 and tomatoes at 47. The Dragonite procs herbs at 257 and corn at 47. Now, if you look at this infographic here, all the way to the right, you'll see that herbs, which the Dragonite procs in the same size as the Venusaur does, are worth 130 base power. Honey is 101. So every time the Venusaur procs the honey, it's getting this much value out of its proc times whatever the proc size is, while the Dragonite's getting this much. That's almost a 30% increase. It's a little different because the 1 kind of messes up the math, but it's like probably like a 27 to 30% increase in base value. And then if we compare the corn's got 140 base power to the tomatoes, which is the equivalent drop on the Venusaur. Tomatoes are 110. And Venusaur is not a bad Pokemon. Venusaur is one of the strongest ingredient finders in the game. The Kanto starters are considered some of the best in this game. So the fact that the Venusaur's drops are significantly weaker than the Dragonites, and the fact that the Dragonite has pretty much the same ingredient rate as the Venusaur, while also having more inventory and a significantly faster speed of 43 minutes and 20 seconds, which is more than 3 minutes faster than the Venusaur, it should help you understand why the Dragonite is so good at producing ingredients. In fact, the Dragonite, here's where I'm going to start getting into the ingredient list discussion about the Dragonite, is that it has like a dream spread of ingredients. A lot of players will say that you're really only looking for a mix of the herbs and corn. However, I'm going to make the argument in this video that every spread in here has some degree of viability if you have the right Pokemon in your box to assist it, and you know exactly what you're doing with that ingredient list. And not every Dragonite with each one of these lists will fill the same job as an ingredient specialist, but I think there are some interesting use cases for all of these ingredient lists, and I think the community kind of overlooks some of them, particularly the oil in the sea slot, because I think its unique ability to produce them produces some interesting combos. Now, let's get into why that is. Now, first I'm going to talk about the Mono Herb. Mono Herb is interesting on the Dragonite because it is just absurd. Even a subskill neutral nature Dragonite with the Mono Herb build will produce 86 per day. If you follow if you pay attention at all to this and the maximum amount of ingredients that go in, you never need more than 81 herbs a day. That is the single biggest meal requirement of any ingredient in the game currently, and 3 meals a day of 27 herbs means 81 herbs. You don't need more than that. You can do that with literally a Mono Herb Dragonite with no subskills, no nature, nothing. All you need is to not have ingredient finding down and have the Mono Herb list, and you've got it. Does that mean you should invest in that? Not necessarily, because there are technically better ones, and really where the mono ingredient meta lies is you have that guy that produces those ingredients really, really well. You run it for like 2 hours, which you can easily do with this guy since he's got the Charge Energy S. Get all the herbs you need for days, and then swap them out so you don't have to run him again, and you can run a berry specialist in his place or another ingredient specialist that produces the other thing you need. So there's a lot of power and flexibility in the Mono Herb build on the Dragonite, and if you actually compare it to other producers, the Mono Herb Dragonite, now this infographic, I need to shout out, what was the name? I'm looking it up right now to credit the person. Swablu PKSL on X. They made this infographic. It's in Japanese. They don't have an English version of it, but it's still good for understanding things. You just need to know what the numbers are and everything. This is a rough estimation of how many of that ingredient type ingredient specialist with that list will produce in a given day if it doesn't have if it has the right ingredient list and the right, you're just running them all day long at full energy. The Dragonite, as you can see, is by far the best ingredient specialist in the game at just producing outright. And what's crazy about this is it's not even a weak ingredient. Yeah, it's producing more than 100 per day, but it's not even a weak ingredient. It's herbs, which is the, like, 6th highest value ingredient in the game. The second best producer is Skeledirge, producing apples, which is the weakest one in the game. Which, you can just see why this Mono Herb Dragonite is just fundamentally busted at doing what it does, when you look at it from that perspective. Now, additionally, I'm going to also address the Mono Corn build, the Herb Corn. If you're playing into the mono ingredient meta, and let's say you have a Gengar that produces mono herbs. Now, Gengar is a lot weaker than Dragonite for the herb production. In fact, Dragonite's pre-evolution Dragonair almost outproduces the Gengar. I'm sure if you got a ribbon on this guy, it actually would outproduce the Gengar, probably. I don't have the math behind that. I'm just making a guesstimation based off how close it is already. But if you have the mono herb build on the Gengar, that's going to really suit your needs. It's going to be enough. So maybe you make the Dragonite do something else in the mono build. And the other big option is corn. Now, if you look down here, the double corn Dragonite is actually shockingly close to the Beware in corn production. Like, this difference is so small that you're not going to be feeling that much of a noticeable difference between a good Dragonite and a good Beware. The difference will be there, and it will be measurable, but you're not going to really feel that difference in corn production. So, meanwhile, like, if you go down to Mono Herb Comfey, which is the next best option, pretty much. It's actually tied with Stuffle. That's kind of funny. It's way down here, less than half the amount. And this guy doesn't even have corn at base. So, it's a viable option for that as well. And I actually like the Herb Corn Dragonite more than the Mono Herb Beware. Unless I'm at Lapis, because he has a favorite berry there. But because this way I get a little bit of herbs with it as well, on top of a nice amount of corn. And I value that little extra bit of herbs more than I think I'd value this close of a difference in the corn production. Now we're going to start. I also kind of want to discuss this list, the AAB as a list. And I'm really, for being someone who doesn't want to think too much about the mono meta, I'm going to be discussing the mono meta a bit more than what I normally would. The AAC Dragonite also produces a decent amount of herbs. I mean, if we compare this to other, like, ingredient finders, you can see that, like, it's producing roughly the same amount of herbs as, like, an ABA Kangaskhan produces ginger. And a lot of times we would consider this to be a decently viable option for ginger production. Like, just over 50 a day is a decent baseline that if you have the right subskills in nature on the Dragonite, then producing both of these ingredients in roughly equal amounts, actually exactly equal amounts, still can give you a lot of each. So it gives it that flexibility to be a mono option for either herbs or corn that you can just swap it on your team for like a couple hours, get what you need, swap it out, because it's just that crazy how much the Dragonite produces. So, yeah, it's just wild how good it is at producing what it produces. And additionally, there is some synergy here with particularly the Corn Keema Curry, but I think the ABA list is better for that because it's closer to the right ratios. The option is here as well, and I guess I'll get into that now. The Corn Keema Curry, one of the strongest meals, actually the second strongest meal in the game, the strongest curry in the game, is very, very powerful. And it's one of the most synergistic meals in the whole game, being as strong as it is. And theoretically, if you have an ABA Dragonite, it requires these in like a ratio of 2 to 1, roughly. And the ABA produces them in almost 2 to 1 ratio. So, like, you can pretty much make this meal with just the Dragonite, and then either an AAC Tyranitar or an ABA Charizard do really well at making the ginger and the sausage, which means you can basically make this meal with just 2 Pokemon, as long as the ABA Dragonite is one of them. Now, you can do it with the AAB as well, as long as you have something to aid a little bit in the herb production, because it will be lagging behind a little bit there with not having the C one be the herbs. And also this one's a bit rarer of a list too, so you're more likely to catch a good one with this list than this list. Overall, I think this is one of the weakest lists, just because the dual mono build is not the best, but these 3 lists are tremendously strong. But I still think there's potential here as long as you know what you're doing with it. And yeah, the corn chemo curry is really the big thing with it. A lot of players look for that. Now I want to get to what I think are the most interesting ingredient lists, and one of the least talked about ingredient list options as well, because a lot of players just write off the C ingredient. They write off the oil, say it's a troll ingredient, we don't need oil, we want corn, we want herbs. Oil's designed for Toxicroak, and I've heard a lot of things like that. I don't think the C ingredient is that bad. I think that it just changes what the Dragonite is designed to do. Where these lists are designed to really take advantage of the corn chemo curry or the mono meta, I think these ones are more designed for thinking about synergy. And let's get into the one that I think is more interesting first, the AAC list. I think this is crazy, and I'm surprised I've never really seen anyone else make this comparison before. Oil and herbs, that's what it makes. Oil and herbs. If you have the right sub skills on it, just like, even if it just helps beat M, ingredient finding M, you can get almost 75, you can get just over 60 of each per day. If I go to this, and you look at the Slowpoke tail meals, you can see that you only really need like 75 herbs a day for that one. And you don't need 60 of either the oil or the herbs for this one. And I think if you're prepping for an event week, and let's say you want to focus on re-rolling the berry type to get the berry type that you want. I did this with the Suicune event. I re-rolled until I got electric berries. If you want to do that, the biggest thing that holds it back is that you can't really prep a meal, because you don't know what meal type you're going to get when you prep for a berry type. Because you can't risk re-rolling that berry, because you already have lower odds re-rolling the berry than you do rolling the right dishes. So to combine it, make it that you have to roll dishes and berry, you're just most likely never going to get that amazing roll. So you kind of have to prep for any possible outcome on the dishes if you're prepping for berry. And the Dragonite, the AAC Dragonite, if you have prepped in advance just 210 Slowpoke tails, I know that sounds like a lot, but if you give 2 weeks time to it, or like even 1 week of prep with the right Slowpoke tail design team, then you can make sure that you have 2 of your meals covered just by running the Dragonite alongside whatever. Like the one slot on your team has to be Dragonite, one slot on your team has to be your Energy for Everyone healer, and then the other 3 slots on your team can be whatever berry specialist you want, because your meal's covered by those 210 Slowpoke tails and the Dragonite. And I think there's a lot of value in that, since it covers 2 of the meal category types. You can then use whatever ingredient space you have left to prep a different meal, and maybe since you're thinking about possibly running the Dragonite with the herbs and oil, you look for something that takes some oil. So, I don't know, this Explosion Popcorn. You only have to prep then 15 corn and 7 milk per meal, which if I pull up a quick calculator on my side monitor here, that's only 22 ingredients per meal. 22 ingredients per meal, 21 meals in a week, that's only 462. Plus the 210 tails, that's 672 bag space. If you fully upgrade your bag, you have 700 bag space, which means you can fit that corn, that milk, and those tails in there, and then suddenly, you already know what your team's going to be for that week, you just don't know what your dish is going to be. But no matter which one you get, you're running the same team, and you can just re-roll until you get the right berry, and not have to worry about meals at all. I think that it's commonly overlooked that the AAC Dragonite pairs really partner with the Slowpoke tail meals, just because I think Slowpoke tails are kind of underrated right now in the community. a lot of people know they have a lot of value, but because of how difficult they are to get, a lot of people look at these Slowpoke Tail options and are like, that's unachievable. But if you are prepping for a good event week, then I think there's a lot of strength in just how much these overlap and what ingredients they take, and the fact that the Dragonite with the AAC list has both of those ingredients. So, overall, I think that's probably one of my favorite ingredient lists to talk about on the Dragonite, just because I think it is so interesting and unique. But once again, if you don't have a good tail producer, like my situation, I don't have a good tail producer. I would not be looking for this list, because the biggest thing that it has going for it is synergy with tails. Now, the final one, the ABC, you would think they would have a similar role to what the AAC list does, since it's got the oil, and that's like the thing that's making them different from the rest. But I think that these two Dragonites function entirely differently, entirely independently from each other. And that is because this one, I think, is a slept-on option for salad weeks for making green grass salad. Now, if you can build around the Ninja Salad's better, obviously. It's ranked higher. But if you look here, there's only a difference of about 300 value, which, in the grand scheme of things, isn't really that much. So if you can get a good team for the green grass salad, then why bother with the Ninja Salad? And one of the biggest weaknesses of the Ninja Salad is that you can cover the soybeans and the leeks with a Quaquaval Ball. But there's nothing in the game that uniquely covers ginger and mushrooms, which means you're going to need at least 3 ingredient specialists to cover the Ninja Salad. The green grass salad, and that's one of the strengths of the corn keema curry, is that you can do it with just the Charizard and the Dragonite. Green grass salad, on the other hand, has oil and corn. So pretty much, with this Dragonite, I suggest that you just ignore the herbs. It is producing some of them, but it's such a small amount, it's not really significant enough. And also, this meal takes more oil than it does corn, which, as we know, it produces the C ingredient in the biggest batches. So it's producing a lot of oil to cover this meal. Now, one of the weaknesses of this is that the ABC Dragonite just isn't going to produce enough corn unless you get, like, you know, stupid stats on it. Like, if you get the ingredient finding up and the XP gains down nature with the help speed and the double ingredient finding, then you'll get 48 corn a day. I think that's enough. Let's see, 17 times 3. 51. So even that's not enough. So you would need some Pokemon on the team with help bonus to boost this Dragonite up to really make that threshold. Or you'd need to level it past 60 to get more speed to maybe unlock that level 75 skill. But overall, you're not going to be getting quite enough corn. But I think a lot of players have Gardevoirs that have corn as their B ingredient. I think that's a pretty common thing, just because Gardevoir is at the top of the meta right now. And the corn is its B ingredient on Gardevoir, which means you are more likely to have the corn on the Gardevoir than you are the apples. And even though you're not looking for ingredients on your skill specialist, the fact that it's there means that this option is actually decent for a lot of players, because the Gardevoir can aid by giving just a little bit of corn every day to the Dragonite, because you probably have that team filled by the Gardevoir anyway. That team slot filled by the Gardevoir anyway. So, and if it's not quite enough even after your Dragonite and your Gardevoir, then you can get a little more corn from a few other Pokemon, like if you run Dedenne and you have it at level 60 that has corn. At least I think Dedenne has corn, right? I'm pretty confident it's Dedenne. But there are other Pokemon that have corn. I know Ninetales does. You can easily aid it to get corn, just enough corn for this meal. And then it pairs with the Victory Bell, or the Mr. Mime, which, as I talked about with the Dream Eater Butter Curry, are fantastic for the tomato-potato combo. In fact, an ABA on the Victory Bell or Mime is actually better for doing this than any of the combos that we have for Dream Eater Butter Curry. So, you can also do it with Venusaur too if you have an ABC one. But it's just interesting because you can basically cover this meal in 2 Pokemon with the Dragonite and the Victory Bell. Meanwhile, you need a minimum of 3 for the Ninja Salad. So I think if you have the right team and the right Pokemon, if you don't have an ABB Gardevoir, then maybe this isn't the choice for you, because you maybe won't be able to aid the Dragonite enough to make the corn for this meal. But overall, I think it's a very slept-on option. I don't see too many people talking about this green grass salad, and I don't see anyone discussing the potential of the ABC list, because they just see triple mixed and think that it's bad, because it's not producing a significant amount of any of the 3. The thing about this guy is he is so good that he actually produces a significant amount of them. So, overall, Dragonite. Oh, something else before I wrap this up. I wanted to discuss the Dragonite's potential as a berry specialist. Now, it may have the ingredient specialty, but something very interesting about it is that it is exactly 2/3 the frequency of Altaria, meaning that every single time that the Altaria procs twice, the Dragonite's going to proc 3 times. The Dragonite is 50% more productive than the Altaria. Well, most notably, if you have Berry Finding S on them, the Dragonite procs 2 times every 3 times. It procs 2 berries 3 times for every 2 times the Altaria procs, which the Altaria procs 3 berries. That means, realistically, a Berry Finding S Dragonite should theoretically output the exact same amount as a Berry Finding S Altaria. Now, that doesn't necessarily work out in practice, because as level goes up, level actually benefits slower Pokemon more because there's frequency differences between each level. I could dive into that, the math behind that, way later, but basically, it does benefit the Altaria slightly more. But as you can see here, even if you're sneaky snacking, which is what I have them set to right now, the Dragonite produces pretty much the same amount of berries as the Altaria if they both have Berry Finding S, despite the fact that the Dragonite is an ingredient specialist and the Altaria is a berry specialist. It's just interesting. Now, if we eliminate sneaky snacking from the picture and allow them both to collect their skills and their ingredients, the crazy high value of the ingredients on the Dragonite actually makes it outproduce, even if you're just using these ingredients as filler, just filler for the pot. The ingredients on the Dragonite actually outproduce the Altaria by a pretty significant amount. Oh, I forgot to make it default. By a pretty significant amount, as you can see here. Despite the fact that it is an ingredient specialist. And oftentimes when you're running a berry specialist, you're just using the ingredients as filler. You can use them intelligently, and I recommend, if you can, you should. But overall, and if you are doing that, then this guy's going to be benefiting even further from having the ingredients be stronger. But there is a case to be made for if level 100 comes around and the berries are on the same curve as they currently are. Now this is projections. They could change things. This might not be the actual strength output when level 100 is implemented into the game. But if they eventually do implement level 100, then you can see that even then, the Berry Finding S Dragonite, at least with the AAA list, does still outproduce the Altaria for raw strength, as long as you have the pot filler space for its extra herbs. So, there is the argument to be made that if you have cracked berry finding stats on the Dragonite, just absolutely amazing berry finding stats on the Dragonite, then there is an argument to be made that maybe, even with ingredient finding down, if it has the Berry Finding S, you know, the help bonus, the help speed M, but it's got ingredient finding down, you can just kind of repurpose this guy and make him a pseudo Altaria. Because for some reason they designed the Dragonite to be so ridiculously powerful that he outclasses Altaria at what Altaria was designed to do, despite not having that specialty himself. In fact, oh, I forgot to mention, during this evaluation, I had Dragonberry Favored turned on. I actually didn't even know that I had that. I forgot that I had done that. So that makes it even more sad for the Altaria, if you think about it. So yeah, I think the reason why he's so powerful at berries, why he's so powerful at, like, with any of his ingredient lists is because I think the devs wanted to reward you for the investment of a pseudo. I think they've intentionally designed these pseudos to have very synergistic lists and to be very powerful. I'll discuss that more when I get to Tyranitar. Tyranitar, I think, also has a full spread of potentially useful ingredient lists as well. I think they intentionally designed them in a way that any of their lists can be usable, and they intentionally design them in a way that they are powerful for their berries, and they just are the best at what they do. I like the pseudos. I think it's a neat concept to have this Pokemon that takes more to raise, but once you get them to that level, you just have something that is top of the line, and Dragonite is easily an S tier Pokemon, and I genuinely think it is the strongest ingredient specialist in the game. So, I hope you learned something about the Dragonite. I hope you've learned a little bit more about how to use it. If you want to hunt the Dragonite, go to Lapis Lakeside, as it and its pre-evolutions are a Lapis Lakeside exclusive. You won't find it anywhere else. Some people may have Dragonites that they caught at Greengrass Island. That is from a Legacy event. Any Pokemon like that cannot be caught these days. Because when Lapis was released, they released it so that you could catch them at Greengrass, as you can see here. But now they only exist at Lapis. So, unfortunately, it's locked behind a pretty late game area. If you're new to the game, you won't be able to even think about getting this guy until you're way further along. But once you do, hunt it, because, man, it is strong. But before investing, just know what you're getting yourself into. Something else I didn't mention, it's evolution requirements. The Dragonair, it evolves into Dragonair at level 23, which is pretty high for evolving into a mid-evolution. That's where we see about some mid-20s, mid to upper 20s is where we see a lot of other Pokemon fully evolve. So to see that as the mid-evolution is pretty absurd. And then, to get to the Dragonite, it's level 41. And it takes even more candy than other Pokemon as well. It takes 40 to get to the mid-evolution and 100 to get to the final. Most Pokemon only take 20 and then 80. So overall, it's costing you 20 more per evolution. That's 40 more candies across its lifetime. And it has a much higher level requirement for the evolution as well. This dude is going to have its second ingredient unlocked. Before you get it to actually be a Dragonite. So they're just... It's crazy the investment you have to make to get one of these guys. But it is so very worth it if you know what you're doing with it. I hope you learned something. I hope you know what to do with the Dragonite. I hope that one day you can unlock its true potential as well. Thank you.